Lyon, France. November 1942. The wanted poster appeared overnight on every street corner, tacked to cafe walls, plastered across government buildings. A crude sketch showed a woman's face, sharp features framed by shoulder-length hair. Below, in bold German type, "The woman who limps is one of the most dangerous Allied agents in France. We must find and destroy her." Klaus Barbie, the Gestapo's butcher of Lyon, studied the poster with barely contained rage. For 15 months, this woman had operated under his nose, building networks, orchestrating escapes, arming resistance fighters. His agents had infiltrated communist cells, broken socialist groups, and destroyed underground networks across Vichy France. Yet this one American woman, hobbling through Lyon on a wooden leg she called Cuthbert, had evaded every trap. What Barbie didn't know, what none of the 500 Gestapo agents now flooding Lyon could have imagined, was that Virginia Hall had already begun her escape. Not through the established smuggling routes she'd spent months perfecting, but across the Pyrenees Mountains in winter, on foot, with a prosthetic leg that turned each step into agony. This is the story of how an American woman rejected by the Foreign Service, dismissed because of a missing leg, became the Allied spy the Nazis feared most. How she built intelligence networks from nothing, coordinated resistance operations across occupied France, and when capture seemed certain, disappeared into mountains that killed trained soldiers. The transformation from society girl to master spy took less than 3 years. In that time, Virginia Hall rewrote the rules of espionage and proved that determination could overcome any disability, any prejudice, any obstacle the enemy placed in her path. Virginia Hall's journey to becoming the Limping Lady began with a hunting accident that should have ended any hope of adventure. Born in 1906 to a wealthy Baltimore family, she'd spent her 20s pursuing diplomatic dreams, studying languages across Europe, and cultivating the skills that seemed destined for a foreign service career. French, German, Italian, Russian, she spoke them all fluently. She understood European politics, had lived in Vienna, Warsaw, Izmir, and Venice. Then came December 1933, a hunting trip in Turkey. The shotgun discharged accidentally, the blast tearing into her left foot. Gangrene set in before proper medical treatment could be arranged. Turkish doctors amputated below the knee. At 27, her diplomatic dreams died with her leg. The State Department's rejection was clinical. Employees with amputations are not eligible for foreign service positions.
Most people would have retreated into comfortable society life. Virginia Hall got fitted for a wooden prosthetic, named it Cuthbert, and learned to walk again. Not just walk, hike, swim, drive. When war erupted across Europe in September 1939, she was in Paris, ready to act. The German blitzkrieg through France in May 1940 found Hall driving an ambulance for the French army, navigating bomb-cratered roads while Stukas screamed overhead. After France's surrender, she fled to London, one of thousands of refugees escaping Nazi occupation. But where others sought safety, Virginia Hall sought purpose. The Special Operations Executive noticed her immediately. Churchill's Ministry of Ungentlemanly Warfare, created to set Europe ablaze, desperately needed agents who could blend into occupied France. Hall spoke perfect French with a slight American accent, had lived in the country for years, and carried an American passport. The United States wasn't yet at war, making her technically neutral. Her disability, viewed as disqualifying by the State Department, made her forgettable, unassuming, invisible. She's perfect, and so recruiter noted in files captured after the war. A woman, American, disabled. The Germans will never suspect her of being an intelligence agent. They can't imagine someone with her limitations undertaking field operations. The SOE's training regime broke hardened soldiers. Hall completed it without complaint. She learned encoding and decoding, dead drops and brush passes, surveillance detection and lockpicking. They subjected her to realistic Gestapo interrogations, including water torture. They taught her how to kill silently, how to sabotage infrastructure, how to organize resistance cells. Most importantly, they taught her how to survive alone behind enemy lines with minimal support. In August 1941, Virginia Hall became the first female SO agent to establish permanent residence in occupied France. She entered through Spain carrying forged documents identifying her as Brigitte Lecontre, a French-American correspondent for the New York Post. The cover was genius. Journalists traveled freely, asked questions without suspicion. cultivated contacts across society. The Post even published her articles, maintaining the fiction. Her destination was Lyon, France's third-largest city, industrial powerhouse, and geographic heart. Located at the confluence of the Rhine and Saône rivers, Lyon sat perfectly between occupied northern France and Vichy's collaborationist south. More importantly, it lay on the primary smuggling routes to neutral Spain and Switzerland. If the Sceaux wanted to build networks in France, Lyon was the essential hub. Hall established herself methodically. She rented an apartment, cultivated contacts among Lyon's diverse population, and began the painstaking work of identifying potential resistance recruits. Her cover as a journalist provided perfect justification for meeting people across the social spectrum: factory workers, priests, doctors, police officers, farmers, businessmen. The network she built, codenamed Heckler, started small: a sympathetic nun who could provide safe houses, a railway worker willing to report German troop movements, a forger capable of producing identity documents, a brothel owner whose clients included Vichy officials prone to pillow talk. Each recruit required careful vetting, patient cultivation, and absolute compartmentalization. The cardinal rule of resistance work: each member knew only what they absolutely needed to know. Within 3 months, Heckler had expanded across southern France. Hall coordinated a network of over 90 agents providing intelligence on German ammunition depots, fuel storage facilities, troop movements, and most significantly, submarine bases being constructed along the Mediterranean coast. The information flowed through Hall to London via radio transmissions, coded messages hidden in her newspaper dispatches, and occasionally through couriers traveling to neutral countries. But intelligence gathering was only the beginning. Hall's mission expanded rapidly. The SOE needed safe houses for incoming agents, escape routes for downed Allied airmen, distribution networks for weapons, and equipment being parachuted from England, and coordination with the fragmented resistance groups scattered across France. The safe house network Hall established saved hundreds of lives. Allied bombers flying raids over Germany frequently limped back toward England with battle damage, engines failing, fuel running low. Many didn't make it across the Channel. Crews bailing out over occupied France faced immediate danger: German patrols, collaborators eager for rewards, and a simple problem of being foreign soldiers in enemy territory without papers, money, or local knowledge. Hall's network provided the lifeline. Resistance members would locate downed airmen, provide civilian clothes and forged documents, then move them through a chain of safe houses towards Spain or Switzerland. Hall coordinated the entire operation, arranging transportation, bribing officials, and managing the logistics of moving dozens of men hundreds of miles through occupied territory. Lieutenant Bernard Botz, a B-17 pilot, shot down over Lyon in March 1942, later described his rescue: "French farmers found us in the wreckage. They hid us in a barn, brought a woman who spoke English. She was American, maybe 30s, walked with a limp, never told us her name. She arranged everything: papers, clothes, money, contacts. 2 weeks later, we were across the Spanish border. She saved our lives, then vanished back to Lyon like she'd never existed." The Germans noticed the steady stream of escaped airmen reaching neutral countries. Gestapo investigators recognized sophisticated organization behind the escapes. Someone in Lyon was coordinating a major intelligence network under their noses. Meanwhile, Hall tackled another critical mission: coordinating weapons drops. The Sceaux was parachuting supplies to resistance groups across France: small arms, explosives, radio equipment, medicine, money. But delivering weapons to remote drop zones was pointless without ground organization. Someone had to receive the drops, distribute the materials, train resistors in their use, and maintain operational security. Hall established relationships with multiple resistance groups, including communist cells, goalist organizations, and independent networks. Many of these groups distrusted each other, viewing rival resistance movements as potential threats. Hall somehow maintained working relationships with all of them, coordinating operations while preventing the internal conflicts that destroyed other networks. Her coordination extended beyond logistics. Hall trained resistance fighters in weapons use, demolition techniques, and security procedures. She taught them to recognize surveillance, identify infiltrators, and maintain compartmentalized operations. The organized resistance movement, that would later prove crucial during the Allied invasion, owed its foundation largely to Hall's organizational genius. The most audacious operation Hall coordinated involved freeing 12 SO agents and resistance fighters imprisoned at Mauzac prison near Bergerac. The arrests had devastated SO networks in southern France. These men knew operational details, contact networks, and safehouse locations. If the Gestapo tortured them successfully, the entire resistance structure across southern France could collapse. Hall couldn't allow that. Working with resistance contacts, she orchestrated an elaborate prison break involving bribed guards, forged documents, and precisely timed coordination. On July 16, 1942, all 12 prisoners escaped. The operation was flawless. Within days, Hall had moved them through her escape routes towards Spain. The Gestapo response was immediate and overwhelming. 500 agents flooded Vichy France. Klaus Barbie arrived in Lyon with orders to destroy the resistance networks operating in the city. The Germans had tolerated scattered resistance activity, viewing it as manageable annoyance. The Mauzac prison break proved that organized, sophisticated networks were operating with impunity that could not stand. Hall's French police contacts, previously reliable, became liabilities under intense German pressure. Officers who had looked the other way, provided warnings, or actively assisted her network, now faced arrest themselves if they didn't cooperate with the Gestapo. More dangerous was the betrayal from within. Abbé Robert Alesch, a Catholic priest Hall had recruited, was actually a German agent. Alesch had infiltrated her network months earlier, gradually identifying members, learning procedures, and mapping the organization. In August 1942, the trap snapped shut. 3 agents were arrested at a café in Limoges, nearly 200 miles from Lyon. Under interrogation, one broke, providing names and locations. Within days, the Gestapo rolled up substantial portions of the Heckler network. Wireless operators were captured, safe houses identified, weapons caches seized. The carefully constructed intelligence apparatus Hall had spent 15 months building was collapsing. Hall realized the network was compromised but didn't know how badly. The wanted posters appearing across Lyon in October 1942 made clear her time was running out. The Gestapo knew about the woman who limps. They had her description, likely her aliases, possibly her safe houses. Every day she remained in Lyon increased the odds of capture. The SO ordered her immediate evacuation. London suggested using one of the escape routes she'd established for downed airmen. Hall refused. Those routes were likely compromised. If Alesch had penetrated her network, the Gestapo would be watching the established smuggling lines, waiting for her to use them. Instead, Hall decided on a route so dangerous that even trained soldiers hesitated to attempt it. Crossing the Pyrenees Mountains into neutral Spain on foot, in winter, with a prosthetic leg. November 1942 marked the Allied landings in North Africa, Operation Torch. The strategic situation shifted instantly. Germany's tolerance for Vichy's nominal independence evaporated. German troops poured into the unoccupied zone, dissolving the fiction of Vichy sovereignty. The Gestapo no longer operated under political constraints. Klaus Barbie had complete authority to hunt Virginia Hall. Hall's final message to London was characteristically understated. "Cuthbert is being tiresome, but I can cope." The SO radio operator, unfamiliar with Hall's nickname for her prosthetic leg, replied with concern, "If Cuthbert is tiresome, eliminate him." Hall's response wasn't recorded, but she departed Lyon within hours. The Pyrenees crossing took 3 days through terrain that killed experienced mountaineers. Hall traveled with a small group of refugees, all fleeing German occupation. The guide, a Basque smuggler, warned that attempting the crossing with a wooden leg was suicidal. The paths were steep, covered in ice and snow, with temperatures well below freezing. Falls were common. Injuries far from medical help were death sentences. Hall completed the crossing on determination alone. Each step with Cuthbert required conscious effort on the icy trails. The prosthetic chafed terribly, opening wounds that bled into her sock. Mountain streams had to be forded in freezing water. Steep climbs demanded using her arms to haul herself up rocky slopes. When her wooden leg broke on the second day, she splintered it with tree branches and continued. The Spanish border patrol found her group stumbling down the southern slopes, exhausted and hypothermic. Spanish authorities, nominally neutral but sympathetic to Germany, imprisoned the refugees pending deportation back to France. Hall spent 6 weeks in Spanish prisons, using her American passport and contacts to eventually secure release. She reached Madrid in January 1943, then Lisbon, finally London in February. The SOE debrief was extensive. Hall provided detailed reports on Gestapo operations, identified the traitor Alesh, and explained the collapse of her networks. Despite the disaster, sole leadership recognized her accomplishments. In 15 months, she'd built the most extensive Allied intelligence network in southern France, coordinated the escape of dozens of Allied servicemen, supplied weapons and training to resistance groups, and provided crucial intelligence on German military operations. King George VI awarded Hall the Member of the British Empire Medal, one of Britain's highest civilian honours. At a private ceremony in March 1943, she was the first American woman so honoured for wartime service. Churchill himself requested to meet her, praising the woman who made the Gestapo post-wanted posters. The SO wanted to send her back to France immediately. Hall refused to work for the British again. Too many German agents knew her face, her walk, her methods. Instead, she joined America's Office of Strategic Services (OSS), the newly formed intelligence agency that would become the CIA. The OSS was eager to employ someone with Hall's experience, but Hall faced immediate obstacles. OSS leadership, still establishing procedures and hierarchy, was uncomfortable placing a woman in charge of field operations. Gender prejudice that had blocked her foreign service career resurfaced. The OSS offered her a desk job in London, coordinating intelligence reports. Hall declined. She insisted on returning to occupied France for field operations, or she would resign. The standoff lasted weeks. Finally, the OSS compromised. Hall could return to France, but only as a wireless operator, technically subordinate to male agents coordinating operations. Hall accepted, knowing she could shape her mission once on the ground. The challenge was getting her back into France undetected. Parachute insertion was impossible. Cuthbert made landing too dangerous. Submarine insertion along the northern coast risked German naval patrols. Flying her in by light aircraft required secure landing zones that didn't exist. The solution was audacious. A Royal Navy motor torpedo boat would land Hall on a remote Brittany beach in the dead of night, using the same techniques employed for commando raids. On March 21, 1944, Hall crossed the Channel in rough seas, reaching the French coast near Morbihan. She and another agent paddled ashore in a rubber dinghy, landing on the rocky beach before dawn. Hall's transformation for this mission was remarkable. She'd undergone extensive dental work to change her smile, added grey to her hair, and practiced moving with a hunched shuffle that disguised her limp. Her new identity, Diane, was an elderly peasant woman from rural France, a widow who'd lost her farm to German requisitions and now wandered between relatives seeking refuge. The disguise worked perfectly. German patrols encountered her multiple times during the journey from Brittany to central France. They saw a stooped old woman with grey hair, moving slowly, clearly no threat. One patrol officer even helped her cross a railway line. Never realizing he was assisting the spy, Klaus Barbie had spent months hunting. Hall's mission parameters were limited: establish radio contact with London, observe German troop movements, and prepare intelligence reports for D-Day planning. No direct resistance coordination, no network building, no operations that might expose her. The OSS feared losing their most experienced agent before the invasion. Hall interpreted these instructions creatively. Within weeks of arriving in France, she'd established contact with multiple resistance groups in Ottawa Department. Using the codename Saint, she began coordinating weapons drops, training resistance fighters, and organizing the networks that would support Allied operations. Her headquarters was a barn near Le Chambon-sur-Lignon, a small village in the mountainous Haute-Loire region. The location provided excellent surveillance of German troop movements while being remote enough to avoid regular patrols. Local farmers, many involved in resistance activities, provided cover and support. The wireless transmissions Hall sent to London were extraordinary in their detail and frequency. She reported daily on German unit movements, defensive positions, supply routes, and troop strength. Her intelligence helped Allied planners understand German dispositions across central France, identifying weaknesses and predicting defensive responses to the coming invasion. But Hall wasn't content with passive intelligence gathering. She coordinated with French resistance groups, called Marquisards, to conduct active operations against German forces. The 3 battalions in her area, totaling approximately 1,500 men, undertook dozens of sabotage missions under her direction. On June 6, 1944, as Allied forces stormed Normandy beaches, Hall's resistance networks launched coordinated attacks across central France. They cut telephone lines, disrupting German communications. They demolished railway bridges, preventing reinforcement movement. They ambushed supply convoys, destroying fuel and ammunition shipments. They provided real-time intelligence on German troop movements, radioed directly to Allied headquarters. The coordination was masterful. Hall managed multiple resistance groups with different political affiliations, maintaining focus on military objectives while preventing the internal conflicts that plagued other regions. The Germans were forced to divert troops to secure their supply lines, weakening their response to the Normandy landings. In July 1944, Hall received new orders. Support Operation Dragoon, the Allied invasion of southern France, scheduled for August 15. Her area of operations shifted to include preparing landing zones for Allied paratroopers and providing intelligence on German beach defenses. Hall's resistance forces expanded rapidly. By August, she was coordinating operations across multiple departments, directing sabotage operations, and organizing supply distribution for thousands of resistance fighters. The official restrictions on her mission had completely dissolved. She was operating as a field commander in all but name. The results were devastating for German forces. In Haute-Loire department, Virginina Hall's resistance networks cleared German troops from La Puy-en-Velay. Before American forces arrived in September, the Wehrmacht units, attempting to retreat north, were harassed constantly. Bridges demolished ahead of them, roads blocked, convoys ambushed, communications severed. A German officer captured in September 1944 reported during interrogation, "We faced an invisible enemy that struck everywhere. Supply columns disappeared. Communications failed constantly. Local French civilians we'd dealt with for years suddenly became hostile. The roads themselves seemed to fight against us. Every bridge was destroyed, every fuel depot burned, every ammunition cache blown up." We later learned it was organized by an American woman, a woman, coordinating thousands of fighters. We couldn't believe it. The liberation of France revealed the full scope of Hall's accomplishments. In her second mission, operating for 6 months from March to September 1944, she'd coordinated resistance operations across multiple departments, directed dozens of sabotage missions, radioed hundreds of intelligence reports, trained thousands of resistance fighters, and helped clear central France of German troops before Allied armies arrived. General William Wild Bill Donovan, OSS director, personally flew to France to meet Hall after liberation. At a private ceremony in Paris, he awarded her the Distinguished Service Cross, America's second highest military decoration. The citation read, "Despite her disability and the constant danger of capture, she displayed extraordinary courage and determination. Her contributions to the Allied victory in France were immeasurable." The irony wasn't lost on anyone present. The woman the State Department had rejected as unqualified for diplomatic service, dismissed because of a disability, had just received one of America's highest military honors for single-handedly organizing resistance operations across occupied France. France awarded Hall the Croix de Guerre. Britain had already honored her with the MB. She remained the only civilian woman during World War II to receive both the Distinguished Service Cross and the Member of the British Empire Medal, yet few people knew her name. Espionage awards are typically classified. Hall's wartime service remained secret for decades. After Germany's surrender in May 1945, Hall continued intelligence work. The OSS transitioned into the Central Intelligence Agency in 1947, and Hall became one of the CIA's first female operations officers. She spent 2 decades in intelligence work, much of it focused on Soviet operations during the Cold War. The CIA proved as resistant to female field officers as the State Department had been to disabled diplomats. Despite her wartime record, Hall spent most of her CIA career assigned to desk positions, analyzing intelligence rather than gathering it. The irony was bitter. The woman who'd proven herself as one of the war's most effective field agents was confined to an office because of her gender. Hall retired from the CIA in 1966 at age 60. She settled quietly in Maryland. avoiding publicity and rarely discussing her wartime service. The few interviews she granted were matter-of-fact, downplaying her accomplishments and deflecting attention. "I wasn't particularly brave," she said in a 1976 interview. "I was doing what needed to be done. Plenty of people did far more dangerous work. The French resistance fighters risked their lives every day. I just helped coordinate things." The French resistance fighters she coordinated remembered differently. After the war, resistance members from across central France maintained contact with Hall, sending letters thanking her for her leadership. Many credited her with saving their lives through her insistence on security procedures and compartmentalized operations. One former Marquisard, writing in 1980, recalled, "She taught us how to stay alive. Before Diane arrived, we were enthusiastic amateurs who would have been wiped out in weeks. She showed us proper security, taught us to think strategically, and gave us the confidence that someone competent was coordinating operations. When she told us to attack, we attacked. When she said wait, we waited. We trusted her completely." Klaus Barbie, captured decades after the war and tried for crimes against humanity, was questioned about Hall during his trial. Asked why the Gestapo never caught her, his response was revealing. "She was the most dangerous of all Allied agents. We knew she existed, knew approximately where she operated, had descriptions and even photographs. But she was a phantom. Every time we closed the net, she vanished. The wooden leg should have made her easy to track. Instead, she used it as camouflage, appearing as a harmless invalid. By the time we realized who she was, she'd disappeared." The statistics from Hall's operations tell part of the story. During her 2 missions in France, spanning nearly 2 years of active operations, she coordinated networks encompassing hundreds of agents. Her intelligence reports numbered in the thousands. She helped arrange the escape of dozens of Allied servicemen. She coordinated weapons drops supplying thousands of resistance fighters. Her sabotage operations resulted in the destruction of countless German vehicles, rail lines, communication facilities, and supply depots. But numbers don't capture the innovation. Hall pioneered techniques that became standard practice for intelligence operations. Her methods for recruiting and vetting agents, maintaining compartmentalized networks, coordinating multi-group operations, and managing security under intense enemy pressure became models studied by intelligence services worldwide. Perhaps most significantly, Hall proved that physical disability wasn't disqualifying for field operations. Intelligence services had traditionally rejected candidates with disabilities, assuming they couldn't handle the physical demands of espionage. Hall demonstrated that intelligence, creativity, and determination mattered more than physical perfection. The prosthetic leg that should have ended her career became her greatest asset. It made her memorable in ways that aided her cover identities, while making her seem harmless to German security. Virginia Hall died in 1982 at age 76. The obituaries were brief, noting her diplomatic service and wartime work without providing details that remained classified. Her full wartime record wasn't declassified until the 1990s. Only then did historians begin piecing together the extraordinary scope of her operations. The CIA headquarters in Langley, Virginia features a display honoring Hall as one of the agency's founding officers. The exhibit includes her MBE medal, photographs from her missions, and excerpts from her wartime intelligence reports. Below is a quote from General Donovan's DSC citation. "She demonstrated qualities of heroism, skill, and determination that stand as an inspiration to all who serve." In 2016, the CIA named a training facility after Hall. The Virginia Hall Expeditionary Center trains intelligence officers in field operations, maintaining the traditions Hall pioneered during World War II. Students learn about her recruitment techniques, her security procedures, and her operational methods. France honored Hall's memory by naming streets in Lyon and Le Chambon-sur-Lignon after her. The British unveiled a plaque at the Special Operations Executive Memorial commemorating her service. In 2019, the United States inducted Hall into the Military Intelligence Corps Hall of Fame. The woman, Virginia Hall, who limped through occupied France on a wooden leg, evading the Gestapo's most intense manhunt, building intelligence networks from nothing, and coordinating resistance operations that helped liberate a nation, received the recognition she'd avoided during her lifetime. But Virginia Hall never sought recognition. She sought purpose. and in the mountains of central France, radioing intelligence reports while coordinating maquisard operations, she found it. The Gestapo called her the most dangerous Allied spy. They were right, but they never understood why. It wasn't because she was particularly skilled in tradecraft, though she was. It wasn't because she was brave, though courage alone sustained her through brutal mountain crossings and months living under false identities, with arrest meaning torture and execution. Virginia Hall was dangerous because she refused to accept limitations, not the limitations imposed by a disability, not the limitations imposed by gender prejudice, not the limitations imposed by an enemy that controlled territory, commanded overwhelming force, and hunted her relentlessly. She saw what needed to be done and found ways to do it. When the State Department said she couldn't serve because of her disability, she found another path. When the Soul said evacuate before capture, she crossed mountains that killed soldiers. When the OSS said coordinate intelligence from a desk, she organized resistance operations across occupied France. At every obstacle, Hall found a way forward. The wooden leg they thought would stop her became her trademark. The disability they believed disqualifying became her greatest asset. The limitations they assumed would confine her became stepping stones to accomplishments that male agents with perfect physical health never matched. In February 1943, after escaping across the Pyrenees, Hall met with Soul leadership to debrief on the Heckler network's collapse. They asked if she wanted to rest, take a desk position, coordinate operations from London's safety. Her response was immediate: "When can I go back?" That question defined Virginia Hall. Not, should I go back, or can I go back, but when. The woman who limped understood something fundamental about determination. Limitations exist only when we accept them. The Gestapo learned that lesson too late, discovering that the most dangerous Allied spy wasn't the one with perfect cover, extensive training, or sophisticated equipment. It was the one who simply refused to quit.